All right, folks, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to be hosted by a very special guest. He is the wonderful, the esteemed Matt Moore. Thank you so much for showing the energy on this podcast. I know that the music gets a little bit loud at the beginning there. Matt Moore of the Action Network does Locked On Nuggets, my good friend. Matt, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. How are you? Just enjoying the off season. I'm enjoying a quiet time in Nuggets land. While I think it's a bummer for Jamal that he's not able to compete for Team Canada. It also means that with Vlatko unfortunately out and Nikola taking the year off and Jamal now done, that I don't have to devote a lot of energy towards, like, I'll watch some of the World Cup because it's fun basketball, but I'm glad to have like a little bit of a break from like needing to be dialed in on something as I'm knee deep in off season stuff right now.
There's a lot. I'm off season, especially in the NBA. It's pretty formulaic when it comes to, you know that the lists are going to come out. You know that all of the there's a lot of things that happen like from a transactional standpoint that help keep the wheels turning. But you get to a dead point where we've got like, I don't know, we've got various issues with like Harden being stagnant and Lillard being stagnant and whatnot, and that's probably going to continue. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this particular topic, because I think that there's a lot that we can get into from a superstar trade standpoint, from a transactional offseason standpoint, as you mentioned. But I'm glad you're able to stay busy. I know that I have definitely been struggling when it comes to formulating good content following a championship run. It's definitely something like what's the most important and most valuable thing that I can really contribute at this point. I've definitely struggled with that.
Yeah, that's why over at Locked On Nuggets we've done the guests. That's where I've gone to. Is I'm going to have you on here in a few weeks and just to talk about like the experience of covering the championship. Like to me, it's like there's such a rush to be like, what about next year? The title defense, and can they win another? And is there a dynasty? And and then I'm kind of like, you won the title. Like, take the summer and enjoy the summer. Like, enjoy being the champion, the celebration. Remember the title. This finally happened. Don't move on too quickly. So that's what I'm trying to focus on as far as the Nuggets content goes.
I definitely feel that there's a lot that I just want to enjoy when it comes to basking in the glory of this. I've been watching It's Wade's Twitter feed, which has been awesome. That is a hellscape of fire of Twitter mentions and receipts and whatnot. So that's always been enjoyable, and that's been a fun thing to track. But there will eventually be a new season, and Denver will eventually have to defend their title, and I'm looking forward to being able to cover that too. But for now, let's talk about. Actually, I want to get into this this list that you're putting out. You're putting out something tomorrow. You and I, this was kind of the basis for why I wanted to get you on and to talk about this stuff. It's a annual rite of passage for the offseason, and I assume that Action Network was very happy that you're going to put out a top 100 players list. What's the sitch? What's the top 100 looking like this year for you?
Yeah, so I actually wasn't going to publish it. I had enough people ask me like, hey, what's your top 10? Or hey, what's your top 25? Whether it was other media folks or coworkers at Action were like, hey, what's your top 10? Or these other things. And then I was kind of like, well, I need to have like an estimation of like the ranking so I can evaluate. Because I also have put together, I've used expected wins over at dunksandthrees.com to figure out what the spread value for all these players is from an expected win standpoint. That's just one metric to use. And I was like, well, I want to be able to evaluate what I think of them versus the spread. And so if you're going to do that, you need to do a top 100. So I did the top 100. I started the ranking, did like the first run of it, and was just like, threw it into a Slack that I'm in with a bunch of old friends I used to write with. And unfortunately, my editor at Action Network, Andrew Lynch, is also in that chat and was like, whoa. You did a top 100 list? I was like, yeah, but I don't want to publish it. Like, I don't want to deal with the mentions on it. The next thing I get is a Slack from my official Action Network channel with him and our graphic designer being like, hey, Matt's got a top 100 list. He's going to write it up. Can we get graphics for it? And I was like, I never agreed to this. I didn't. No, I don't want it. But yeah, so we're doing top 100. I've done it. I did it every year at CBS. And that's why I'm bringing back the name, which is the Elite 100. And then I decided to go ahead and do it this year. I've done it. I think I did it once before at Action. Taking a couple of years off. It's a stale concept. I think it's good to do it every couple of years because the other thing is like you will learn so much about the NBA because you'll just be like, huh. Like the one that one of the early ones is just you find out like that guy's a lot older than I thought he was. Or that guy's a lot younger than I thought he was. Or that guy shot a lot better last year. You'll find all this little bits of information that I think helps understanding the context of the league. So like it is an educational exercise. But yeah, so the 4 of the starters of the Denver Nuggets are in the top 100. There is one player that is not in the top 100 because he just missed the cut. He just missed the cut. The way I do it is I put them in tiers first. So I rank every player 1 to 5. 1 being the worst, unplayable, 5 being megastar, superstar, top of the top. And then you rank all the 5s 1 through 5. And then you rank all the 5s 1 through 5. And you do that until you've broken all the tiebreakers. To me, that's the most empirical way because it lets me really decide between the 2 players of like, instead of being like, that guy's here, that guy's there, you're actually able to be like, all right, these guys are in the same area. Like, does this guy belong with these other players or does he belong with a higher player? Seth Partnow, obviously at The Athletic, does the tiers. I could have done that, but Partnow does that in part because, well, it's a cowardly way to do things. And so it avoids the controversy of rankings, but I'm not afraid of such things. So I went ahead and did the ranking.
Oh, you love to be the polarizing figure on Twitter sometimes, and you're willing to wade into the muck at times when it comes to the debates on Twitter. I have also on my end formulated a top 100. Similar process to yours. I have done this multiple times throughout the summer and ultimately ironed it out and was able to sort by tiers and by position. I'm not going to bore everybody with the exact like placement for all of my guys, but I have Nikola Jokić at the top of my list. How long did it take you to decide who would be at the top of your list this year?
5 seconds less. By the time I asked the question, it was already answered. It's Nikola. I will say this. For as amazing as Nikola is, and as dominant as he's been in the last 3 years, as dominant as his playoff run was, as definitive as he established himself as the best player in the world, in part, the reason this was so easy was actually more to do with the other players at the top. The list that I had going into last year, if you would ask me who's the best player in the NBA, to me, it was on any given night, it was Nikola, Giannis, Steph, and KD. Like those four players, I felt like on any given night when I'm watching League Pass, I will be like, that's it. He's the best player. He's got to be the best player. KD's injuries and playoff struggles that knocked him off the list. He fell the furthest of them. Steph is going to be 36 next year. Is still arguably the most impactful, but the way that Nikola controls the game is so definitively greater. Plus, just like, again, Steph's getting older. He was still amazing last year. Steph is probably he's like one of the closest. And then Giannis, I docked for his jumper made a real leap in 2021. And that's partly why they won the title. Not the long jumper. He just needs the short jumper, but that went back this year. He missed more games. He had more injuries. He struggled a little bit more from the field. The stats weren't as dominant, and he didn't hit the jumper as often. So if you take those little things away, that's enough for it to be like, there really is no question. It's got to be Nikola.
I felt very much the same way in the way that I ended up doing it. I'm operating obviously from a place of bias where I know that Nikola is the best player in the world, and it's just about how do I tell people that he's the best player in the world. And by the way, everybody, if you're talking about the webcam video, I think it's issues on my end when Matt's trying to link to my Wi-Fi connection, which I've been having issues. So it's not a Matt issue, despite the fact that it looks like a Matt issue. So sorry. But I had a top tier of Joker, Giannis, Steph, and Luka. Those are the four that ended up as the top four players for me. There's a lot of hemming and hawing that comes from the top 14 or so players, where you could have pretty much everybody in any order. I do think that Jokić is really solidified. Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue it that way, but Jokić has solidified himself as number one. I think that Giannis and Steph are clearly 2 and 3, and anywhere after that, you can really start having questions. I'm curious where you would break off the all NBA caliber players versus all-star caliber players, because I had Anthony Davis at the bottom of the all NBA caliber and Trae Young at the top of the all-star caliber.
Ooh, boy, that's tough. Based off of the fact that there's more guards than forwards, right?
I'm just going by quality and not by position.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. I would say, I think Lauri Markkanen was all NBA worthy last year. He was that good. He was that efficient.
Wow.
So I would go, if we're talking about the guys that I would qualify as all NBA worthy, I would probably get to 21. That's obviously more than you're going to have, right? You're only going to have 15, but my list would be Nikola, Giannis, Steph, Luka, Tatum, Butler, Booker, Durant, SGA, Embiid, Dame, Kawhi, LeBron, AD, Donovan Mitchell, John Morant, Tyrese Haliburton, actually, De'Aaron Fox, Pascal Siakam, Jalen Brunson, and Lauri Markkanen. Those are the guys I would get to.
That is possibly the highest I've ever heard somebody on Lauri.
So, if you really look at not only the efficiency and the scoring, if you dive into the team effect and the advanced metrics, Lauri acquitted himself really, really well. So he was 96th percentile last season in EPM, which is my go-to catch-all stat. And that includes 81st percentile actually on defense and 96th percentile on offense. He really shot at the rim 67%, from the mid-range 45%, which is incredibly good, and 39% from three on volume scoring. And when you look at the on-offs, and the other thing was basically that when Markkanen was playing and they were engaged and they were trying to win, the Jazz were actually a really good team with not a lot of talent. And so, is Lauri a control of the game guy? Is he a playmaker? No, but I would also, I'll go ahead and I'll just screw it. What is the significant difference between Lauri and Joel Embiid? If it's points per game, yay points. I mean, you give Lauri the shot volume and James Harden the pass to him, and he's probably going to generate a ton. You go, it's the defense. The defense, Joel can only play drop, right? So it's if he has to come out on the perimeter, he gets barbecued by Jason Tatum in the most disappointing playoff exit of his career, and you have to actually rank them because there's been so many. So I'm asking, what is it? Because you wouldn't say Embiid's passing, right? This is more a credit to Markkanen than it is a dig at Joel. I don't think people realize how good Markkanen was last year.
That's probably true.
The jump that he made with the Finnish national team, and just again, if we're just going to look at this and we're going to be points per game is why you win MVP. Okay, well, if we're just going to talk about that, then the efficiency of a scorer, when Markkanen's a 3-level scorer, has to kind of be weighed here, because if you're not going to do anything else except dunk on little tiny people or draw fouls by grifting, I admit that Joel's better, but if Markkanen is a crazy efficient volume scorer And Joel is a crazy efficient volume scorer who, when you look at it last year, honestly wasn't even that dominant at the rim. It was mostly the mid-range shot out of pick and roll. So,
You're
look,
right.
I understand that sounds crazy, and I apologize for making the comparison. It's not fair. Lauri Markkanen has never had a failure in the playoffs like Joel has had multiple times. So it's really not fair for me to make the comparison.
I love having you on this podcast. This is awesome. On that note, that's I don't know if that's as spicy as we're gonna get, but that's pretty close. That's awesome.
Again, it's fine. I have Joel much higher on the ranking. It's fine.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
much higher.
Yeah,
like 6 spots.
No, I have him 11 spots higher.
Okay. See, it's funny. I had Lauri at the bottom. Like, I had him outside of that tier. I had him at 34. The reason for that is because it happened so fast in 1 year that I just like to see him do it again.
But it didn't. That's the thing, is that if you really go back and you watch this is what's weird. It's like the 2021 or 22 season for Cleveland never happened. They were on track to coast to a top 4 seed that year. And then Lauri got hurt, then Mobley got hurt, then Allen got hurt, then Garland got hurt. They all got hurt the last month of the season. They slid into the play-in tournament versus Brooklyn and got beat by Brooklyn. And so, like, everyone kind of forgets it, but, like, Lauri was really good with Cleveland. I was buying Lauri stock then. And then he got, obviously, a bigger role with Utah. And so, like, that really matters here. But again, like, look, we're talking about, this is a 50, 39, 88 shooter on 26 points per game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't have to argue with the numbers this year. There's no doubt in my mind. I just would like to see it one more time. And I understand that he did it in Cleveland, and that should have been a thing that really propelled him then. But I would still like to see it. The tier of guards that Jamal Murray is in is what tier?
Jamal is a 5, right? So we've got like the 1 through 5. So he did get a 5. He is in the final one of it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So he is in a tier with Paul George, Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis, Kristaps Porzingis, which I know is surprising, but trust me, like, the numbers are there. Drew Holiday. No, I'm sorry, just Kristaps Porzingis, and that's it. He is above Trae Young, Bam Adebayo, Jaylen Brown, and Drew Holiday.
Wow.
I've moved him up since I last talked to you.
That's fair, and I do appreciate that. I don't know where I ranked Kristaps Porzingis. I think he fell through the cracks on my ranking, unless I'm crazy. Yes, he did fall through the cracks, so I'll have to re-rank him. I would probably have him in the 50s personally. I would not have him where you probably have him.
Okay. Again, I'll just like go back to this. So a lot of this is like, I'm not overly dependent on EPM, right? So like, there's guys in EPM that I'm like, okay, I'm not just like following the list of EPM, but I do think this is significant. So like, as a comparison point, Donovan Mitchell had a plus 5.0 EPM last season. Kristaps had a 5.1. Jaren Jackson had a 4.9. Porzingis had a 5.1. He was 18th in EPM last season.
Sure.
And when you start to like dive into what he actually did, which again, we get into this efficiency, like, I'm really care when you're an efficient shooter across how you shoot. Like, that to me really matters. And he was 67% at the rim, 48% from mid-range, which is sick, 39% from three-point range. I've never been a Porzingis guy. I don't necessarily think highly of him. He was awesome last year. If you look at his synergy splits too, and I went back and watched the film, like, post-up, he was great. He's never been good at post-ups. He was great last season. It was a contract year. And, like, the odds are that he's going to be hurt and slide back, and he'll be back down into where you're describing him now. But I think one of the differences that we're kind of talking about here is that you're dealing with more of a, who have these guys been in the league generally over the last couple of seasons? And I'm much more focused on, like, you're going to get credit and you're going to get punished for recent events because that's the most recent data that we have. I will give you credit if you have a long-standing reputation, but like as an example, I have Chris Paul painfully low for me. It hurts me how low I have Chris Paul, but what I saw last year was a player that is not the same guy. And I have LeBron James in that same boat where it's like he's way lower than I want him to be. But like that's who you are now. And so I have a little bit more of a recency thing. So with Kristaps, whereas you're with Lauri, you're kind of like, you're going to have to prove it to me. I go the other way where I'm like, no, like he showed us this is who he is. He's going to have to disprove that before I put him back down.
Interesting. Okay, and it's a fair point, and as long as it's consistent across the board, then nobody can really complain with that. Like if that's the policy, then that's the policy. There's no issue there. Like I mean, for that reason, like I think I've been pretty reactionary with Karl Anthony Towns. I put him at 35 with Lauri Markkanen at 34. Like I think that there's some reasonable. Go ahead.
I have Cat 48.
Oh yeah,
I hate it because like I'm the only guy in Denver that's always like he's trying, he has good intentions, he just doesn't know how.
That's so funny.
But like, I mean, yeah, I
did it in the tiers that Seth does, but like I have it numbered as well. 15 Trae Young, 16 Anthony Edwards, 17 John Morant, 18 Donovan Mitchell, 19 Jamal Murray. That's the back end of my top 20, and then I have Bam at 20 and De'Aaron at 21. I think that given how wildly different each of those guys performs between the regular season and the playoffs, that it's fair to have them in any order that you actually want between those five guys. I know that players like I think I'm higher on Trae than a lot of people are at this moment, but I think that he's great. And I think that he has there's a lot of context behind what he did this last year where he had not a lot of help around him and did some great stuff with it. Now there's a cost to playing with Trae Young, and he's got to be very specific in terms of how you do it. But like he's a guy that I think belongs in that tier, and I think all those guys really belong in that tier because they haven't really separated themselves in any direction. Jamal grandfathered himself into that tier with this last playoffs. He wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to kind of chew through here because the Trae I think is an interesting kind of counterpoint. In that I have Trae 30 and I have Jamal 26.
Mm-hmm.
So I have Jamal higher than him. And part of that is based off of Trae had a really down shooting year last year, right? And I expect that to improve, but he's not necessarily getting credit for this because there are guys that I'm like, I think they're going to make a leap, and so I'm going to put them higher. Trae's not one of those guys where I'm like, well, we'll see. From a very generalist standpoint, I'll just say like Jamal's a better defender, obviously. And then on top of it, Jamal can shift roles where Trae can't. Right. And I just think that people would rather play with Jamal than Trae. Like that's pretty established that guys don't love playing with Trae Young, but he's a meal ticket, and so it's fine. The balance that's tough here, and it's one of the reasons why I have Jamal 26, is you should get credit if you are an engine.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are the driving force of a team, and you'll notice that like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are both like in this kind of range, and it's interesting because like you can argue that both those guys are the engine for Sacramento.
Yep. And
Anthony Edwards is above Jamal, but like I think Anthony Edwards is similarly to Jamal probably should be like more of an engine, right? Like they should give him more of the wheel, and maybe that will happen in time. But like if you take on that responsibility, like I am constantly finding ways to discredit Kyrie Irving, but like Kyrie's higher here because you can put Kyrie on the Magic next year and he'll just be the engine and they'll win 45 games if he plays, if he shows up. They'll win at a 45 win clip when he's there, and that kind of happens. The other thing that I did kind of focus on here was you have to show that you can do something before being given credit for it. And one of the things that I did with Jamal is Jamal has never been a number one, right? So I can't put Jamal among the number ones because he's never been one.
Fair. And I understand that. It's one of the reasons why I definitely struggle with putting him much higher than like 20, because you can't start like putting him across some of those other number ones, despite the fact that like when you're actually building a winning team, you'd probably take an elite number 2 over a bad number 1 in a lot of cases, especially if you've got that number 1. But if you have just this average team that you're starting with, or you're like, let's say you don't have any of the guys ahead of you, then you're probably taking an engine. And so that's why I have Trey ahead of him. It's why I have Ja ahead of him. It's why I have Ant ahead of him. I even have Mitchell ahead of him. Like I have all those guys ahead of him. I think with Fox, you could really debate it. They're in the same tier. And I think with Paul George and Jaylen Brown and guys like that, like Drew Holiday, like I have Murray above him, above those guys, because he's proven to be a better number 2 than all those guys. Yeah. I really do believe that.
Yeah, and I think I did a playoff ranking entirely separate of the full ranking. And Jamal was like not the only one, but he was a driving reason behind wanting to do that.
Right.
And Jamal I have as the 11th best playoff player.
It's wild. It's awesome.
Like Jokić, Steph, Giannis, Jimmy, Luka, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Kawhi Leonard, Jason Tatum, LeBron James. Those are the only guys I have above Jamal in playoff ranking. And like, I'm not going to argue, like there is no argument for any of those guys, including Devin. I'm sorry. Like you just saw what Devin did for 2 games in games like 3 and 4. Like, and Devin had to do a lot with a pretty crappy roster. Devin's amazing. And Devin's also a better defender than Jamal. So like Devin's up there, but Jamal being 11th is like, that's still incredible. Like the Nuggets have the 1st and 11th best playoff players in the world right now, which isn't necessarily shocking because it's like, well, they just won the title, but it does show you how much this isn't just like Nikola. Like what Jamal did in the playoffs really matters. And, you know, we talk about like, well, let me see you do it again with Markkanen. With Jamal, it was okay. Well, let's see what you do outside of the bubble, and it's like he just ended all that conversation. So, if you told me that this is just based off of like if my list was guys to win a championship with, Jamal's absolutely higher than 26. But I do think that there's a whole context to the regular season that you have to try and search for. You have to understand what it takes in terms of durability, in terms of usage, in terms of stamina, in terms of being able to be that engine to drive all those types of things. Like here is a good example of a guy that I think that probably most people would be grossed out by. Like on the list, like I have Harden higher because James Harden led the league in assists last year. And you could be like, well, assist or whatever. I'm telling you, as somebody that watches Harden every night, I know what Harden does. Harden manipulates the defense as well as anybody. He's done this year after year after year after year after year after year. And sure, like if we're talking playoffs, the gap between Jamal and Harden is wide in Jamal's favor.
Which is great. That's what most people are really caring about with something like that. But there are 82 games in the regular season. And like you said, Harden, he just does a lot of stuff. So I don't fault anybody. Like they're in the same tier. And like it or not, like Jamal hasn't made an all-star appearance. Like he probably should do that. And like that will probably happen this next year, but who knows? Maybe something similar happens where
how many times have you said that? How many times have you said that? So
right. I'm still, I mean, I can't tell this to you, but I'm still mad at Mike Conley.
This is the year. Jamal's gonna do it.
Let's move on real quick to the other 3 Nuggets in the starting lineup. Currently, I had Michael Porter. Actually, not Michael Porter. We'll go to Aaron Gordon. I had him as the 48th best player in the NBA. I had Michael Porter as the 54th best player. I think they're very much in the same tier when it comes to like these secondary or tertiary like role player starters that you need in order to win a title. I think that Gordon is really great, but I also think it's important to understand that he did step back from a scoring perspective in the playoffs and kind of gave way to the other guys and really focused in on the defensive end and did his job within his role.
Yeah, except in game 6, right? Or not game 6, game 4.
Game 4 of the Lakers series?
Of the Heat series.
Oh, the Heat series. He was there. There's a lot of good things that Aaron Gordon did. I don't want to belittle it because he's great.
We're pretty dead on Aaron. I am 46. I'm a little bit higher. We're in the same range.
Oh no.
I have MPJ 74. So,
yeah, I mean, that's crazy to me because I see him in, like, especially with what he provided defensively, I see him in this tier now.
Yeah, but okay, all right. Nuggets fans are very excited about MPJ's defense because it was like, hey, he wasn't the complete liability we thought he was going to be. And like, he played well. He genuinely played good defense. Like, he was a good defender. But it's not like the Nuggets were asking MPJ to go out there and guard Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns. That was AG's job.
He did have to switch onto those guys, though, a lot.
That was AG's job.
Of course, but that's why they got him, and they're different players.
But this is the other thing. So here's what AG brought to the table: scoring, rebounding, defense, passing. He is able to help them make plays. Like, he sets up Jamal, who sets up Nikola. He sets up Nikola, who sets up Jamal or KCP. He sets up Jamal, who sets up Nikola, who passes it back to AG. Like, the screening really matters here because AG can screen effectively. That's not an MPJ strength, right? MPJ is an elite shooter, but really, especially when we look at how little he has in terms of still on the bounce game, he's still a very one-dimensional player. And Aaron, to me, was very much a three-dimensional player this season in all aspects. And he's great in the locker room. And the advanced metrics really love him. And a lot of this is like, it's like, oh, the advanced metrics love him because he was on the court with Nikola. Some, but also they liked him when he wasn't on the floor with Nikola, he had good metrics.
There is a reason why Denver's offense and their defense in the playoffs took a major leap when Nikola was off the floor. It's because Aaron was on.
Yeah. And so, like, Aaron to me contributes in all these ways that help you win. Mm-hmm. And with MPJ, like, do I think MPJ could be top 50, top 40 next season? Absolutely. Like 100%. Like, he could become a 3-level scorer and do all this. In some aspects, MPJ is punished for doing, in this exercise, is punished for doing the exact same thing that made him so valuable to Denver, which is he sacrificed to do his job that they needed him to do.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not like I look at MPJ and be like, oh yeah, he could be like a 3-level scorer, engine dude, primary scoring weapon. He could be Brandon Ingram on another team. I can't say that because he does have enough holes in his handle and holes in his game and honestly injury history for him to have to get dropped here.
I do understand that. I don't want to like firmly go into this because there are other things that I think are more interesting. But like I have him as the 8th best small forward. I have him behind. I got just ahead of. I could go over it actually. Let's go over it because I think it's very important to define what a small forward is. I have Luka as a small forward because that's the position he guards. Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, Brandon Ingram, Chris Middleton, DeMar DeRozan, Michael Porter above Andrew Wiggins, OG Anunoby, Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Williams, guys like that. Look, I think when you set the table for a guy like Michael Porter Jr., he's going to make it at a higher rate than just about any player in the NBA, excluding the NBA Finals. I think that he was fantastic in so many avenues during the playoffs on that run that the finals kind of was it was a little bit of a letdown and I think everybody forgot in a lot of ways that he really kickstarted them in the T-Wolf series at times. He was the defining shot maker in the Sun series at times. He had some great moments against the Lakers and even guarding guys like LeBron. Like there were some really good moments that he had.
Who's better, OG Anunoby or Michael Porter Jr.?
Michael Porter Jr.
You're out of your mind. Like
I don't even think OG's that good. Clearly, Masai Ujiri agrees with you. By the way,
yeah, but I don't even think OG's that good. Like I'm the guy that's been like, I don't get it. Like I still don't get it. But like OG is literally the best wing defender in the NBA. Like that is I can't get around that. Like that's metrics I watched last year. Like that is objectively true that OG is the best there. OG was 48-39 last season. Like I get the idea of MPJ as a shooter. I get it. And he's an elite shooter for sure. But he's got no creation whatsoever. There's nothing off the bounce whatsoever. Nothing.
But he's taking 7.3 threes a game. Like and he's making 41% of them. Like he is one of the best floor spacers in the league, and he takes them.
He's a really great shooter.
Where do you have Klay Thompson?
Low.
Yeah. If you have Klay Thompson higher than Michael Porter Jr., then we have an issue.
Oh no, I do. I have him substantially higher. He was low in the playoffs. Look,
horrible in the playoffs. Not
how
low,
do you
horrible.
But your thing is like show me for more than a year. Like if you're gonna do that, then Klay's got to get more respect.
So Michael Porter Jr. back in the 2020-21 season was awesome. Then he was hurt the year after, and now is what he is. Like he's been mostly good.
But again, like Klay's still a plus defender.
No, he's not. Are you insane? Klay Thompson is not a plus defender anymore. He's a liability.
Wow.
On the defensive end. Why do you think they fell off so badly defensively?
Because he was gassed
getting
in the playoffs.
Ass ripped. Like holy cow. He was horrible.
Yeah, it's really funny because I'm the one that's like, oh hey, like recent events matter, but you're like literally just taking like the Lakers series and defining Klay Thompson here.
No, because I mean even the year before, like I know he's coming off of the Achilles and the knee, but like you're talking about, that's just probably who he is now, and he's not getting any younger. Like
I have him like way low on the playoffs, right? Like I have Klay like really low on the playoffs. But look, let's go back through this. He played 69 games last season. How many games did MPJ play?
I think like 60.
22 points a game, 44% from the field, 41% from three. Does that sound familiar? And 88% from the line.
Oh, really, really nice of Klay Thompson to take advantage of the fact that he's a splash brother and that he has full reign in that offense. Like there's just more shots for him.
Yeah, but the reason that there's more shots for him is like there are reasons for that.
He's a good shooter. He's a really good shooter.
He's also able to do things like move off of screens and take the ball and move it to other places. Like it's not just about like the whole thing here is if MPJ was still at like 44% or whatever, I would have more weight towards this argument because I think that once you get above like league average is 37. Once you get above 40, every percentage that you take higher matters more and more and more and more. But he wasn't that last year. It's 41%, right?
I think that Michael Porter Jr. is a better defender than Klay Thompson.
Okay. That's okay. I don't even mind that necessarily. Like I can understand why you feel that way. I mean, this also makes a lot of sense given that you're ageist. Like we could be real. Like
that's fair.
Like plays over 30, he might as well be dead.
Yeah,
like I'm ready when Jokić turns 30, you're gonna be like, time's up. Pass the baton to Jamal. It's time.
I love it. All right. I think that's enough on the top 100, unless you have any other controversial rankings you want to share.
Hang on. I'm sure I can find something. Now you got me thinking about Klay Thompson. I'm gonna have to think this through. I think a little bit. I actually really think through it. But like, look, MPJ. I will say this: like, he's in the tier. His tier that he's in is Marcus Smart, Andrew Wiggins, Malcolm Brogdon, who won Sixth Man of the Year. MPJ. That's it. That's his gear, and he's ahead of Emmanuel Quickly, Jeremy Grant, notably, Chris Paul, and Josh Giddey and Mike Conley. So like he's above some really good players still, even at 74. But like 8th best small forward in the NBA. You are smoking crack. 8th best small forward in the NBA.
I mean, I have Jeremy Grant at 52 and Michael Porter at 54 and Andrew Wiggins at 55 and OG at 56.
He's better than Jeremy. I'll say that. Like,
okay.
In part because why he's better than Jeremy is that he was willing to sacrifice and do the things that Jeremy wasn't.
Yeah, which is sometimes like he's got the talent to do more. We know that he does. It's just I think he has pigeonholed enough over the course of these last 2 years that like he is focused very much on the role player stuff. And now when Denver needs him to do superstar stuff, I don't think he's going to be able to do it as well.
Where do you have Desmond Bane?
You're going to hate it. I have him at 45.
Okay. I don't think it's crazy. That's not crazy.
Of course not. There's a lot of good players.
There are a lot of really good players.
Now, I have LaMelo Ball at 39, which you're probably not super enticed about. Like you would probably swap those guys.
I mean, with who? What do you mean?
Like LaMelo and Desmond Bane. I have LaMelo at 39 and Desmond Bane at 45.
Yeah. Guess where I have LaMelo Ball.
56.
Higher. Keep going.
49.
No, I'm sorry. He's like the other way.
Oh, 60.
Higher.
65?
Higher.
75?
Higher.
Jesus. 86?
I have him 85th.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, it's
what if you're an engine who should never have the ball?
I could make some compelling arguments between Tyrese Haliburton and LaMelo Ball.
Tyrese was second in assists per game last year.
Yeah, and you're right. And he had a really great center to really pair himself with, and did a lot of. There's a lot of stuff.
No, I want to have the Tyrese conversation. We can get to the other stuff in a second. We got time. Tyrese Haliburton's awesome. He's amazing.
Yeah,
I did a film where I was like you. I was like a lot of people. I was like, all right, whatever. All the draft picks like him. Okay, yeah, he's fine. He'll be pretty good. No, this kid is awesome. He is so good. Ryan, he's the second best passer in the NBA.
That's all. I mean, that's a crazy take. I don't think it's far off. Like he certainly averages like a ton of assists and absolutely isn't like, look, I have him 24th overall. Like, it's not like I have him in a crazy tier. But I do think that you having LaMelo Ball at 85th and Tyrese Haliburton, wherever you have him, probably in the teens somewhere, that's very disparate.
So imagine that LaMelo Ball made teammates better, shot really efficiently from the field. Because bear in mind that Tyrese was 49, 40, 87. Without injuries and with a better team, he's probably 50, 40, 90. Like, I think he's 50, 40, 90 next season. I think Tyrese Haliburton has a chance to lead the league in assists while shooting 50, 40, 90.
That would be dope. That would be dope. He's really good. I'm looking at
LaMelo Ball may never crack, may legitimately never crack 40% from three. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't.
Do you know where he was these last 2 years?
Yeah, he was at 39% the season before last and 38 last year.
So, like, you don't think that he could? Given the shot selection that he has right now?
He feels very much like a 37, 38% shooter to me. And that 2% difference is major. Like, 37% in the NBA is like average. And on volume, yeah, it's nice. He
shot 10 a game.
Yeah, he is certainly I will tell you, if this is a shot taking contest, you got it. LaMelo Ball is one of the best players in the league at taking shots in the NBA. That's awesome. Certainly true. But no, this is not a thing. Fair.
I mean, they didn't do him any favors with the situation they put him in last year, but
no. Go back to the year before. They were a play-in tournament team. And last year they had injuries, but they still had most of like the remnants of that, and they were bad. And do you know why they were bad? In large part because of how LaMelo Ball played. They pin that stuff on injuries. I'm telling you, like, I've watched a ton of Hornets games because that's like the game that's on when I'm making dinner or doing laundry in the early evening. I watch a lot of them. There is no player to me more frustrating than LaMelo Ball. I do not get it.
He only played 36 games last year, so I don't want to hold him to it like too strongly. this next year, I mean, he's got to make some good decisions because there's a lot there. And for obvious reasons, like, I mean, he's a very immature player. Like there's no doubt. Okay. That's where do you have Haliburton, by the way?
I have Tyrese Haliburton. I have him very low on playoffs, obviously, because he hasn't been there. I have him 17th.
Yeah, you are high on Tyrese. That is a.
I'm planting my flag on that one. That's fine. Like I'm willing to be like, this is going to be a top 5 offense next season. They're going to be a playoff team. Tyrese Haliburton is an engine. He is awesome.
Where did I? Oh, I just figured out where I put James Harden twice. I didn't put Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson should be on this list. Okay. I have Haliburton better than Brunson, by the way. So
I have Jalen. I have Haliburton better than Brunson, but I have Brunson 20th, which seems like
that's very high.
It feels that way to me, but I'm also like, look, he had good efficiency on relatively low usage on a playoff team as the best player, and he has playoff wins versus Utah and versus Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
So like he was the reason they won that Utah series. So like he has playoff wins in his resume, which a lot of guys honestly don't, especially not as a number 1. And when I looked at it through that lens, I was like, man, I got to give Brunson credit.
I mean, he's really good. He deserves a lot of credit for. Like I certainly don't have Julius Randle ranked that high, so he does deserve a lot of credit. All right, well, I think that's a good place to cut it. We don't want to spoil too much of this list, so everybody that is listening should go read Matt's piece on the Action Network, which I assume drops tomorrow.
Hopefully, we'll see how my editors do with it. It's a lot of words.
I have no doubt. I think the one thing that we use, the word that we can use to describe Matt is definitely not brief when it comes to these explanations. Anybody that's read the MVP columns understands that for sure. Because you like to do the work, and like if you don't do the work, then people can come after you for no reason. So, all right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to discuss the main portion of this podcast, but we'll go a little bit shorter on that one. We're going to predict where the next superstar trades go. That should be a fun conversation. But first, everybody, this podcast, as you know, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. I very much enjoy using Superbook. They are doing great stuff, and I know that they are in their bag when it comes to football, preseason bets. There is a lot going on over at Superbook right now. They're the most trusted name in Vegas, and now you can use their promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they will match your bets with the promo code MILEHIGH. All you got to do is download that Superbook Sports app. You can definitely make some money over there. Win your first, they'll match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MILEHIGh. Don't miss out on that promo code. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Joined by my friend Matt Moore at HB Basketball. I guess it's not on Twitter anymore. It's still trying to get used to that one. Thank you so much for hopping on with me, Matt. I know that we probably spent way more time debating your top 100 than we expected to at the outset, but I wanted to get into the bulk of this podcast as the unhappy superstar sweepstakes. We are going to chat about some of these superstars, whether it's a superstar or star, whatever you want to call it. I think that James Harden, Damian Lillard, with them being on the precipice of being traded, I think that there's a general exodus that could happen between stars now from a lot of these different teams. There's been a little bit of a holdup this offseason with these particular conversations. And I feel like that once these next moves happen, that the gates can sort of like they're going to flood open, and there's going to be a lot of player movement, especially with the CBA the way that it is. Do you feel the same way? Am I just speaking words? Like what are we What do we think is going to happen on the superstar market?
I mean, I don't think necessarily that they're tied to Harden. I don't necessarily think that there's like, I don't think that it's stopped. I think that's a misconception. Is like, KD's moved 3 times in like 4 years, right? Or 6 years. There's been so many changes already, and there's going to continue to be a lot more. And that's just going to be like the story of the league. I think especially that what we're seeing with the new CBA is we're going to see more of this guys take max deals and then ask out. And then that's like how they reposition themselves. I think we're going to see this until there is a breaking point or some sort of leverage from the league. If they come up with some sort of rule change or whatever, which will be difficult to negotiate with the union. I think it's going to be very difficult, but some of this too has to do with the dynamics of these teams where the Bucks are aging out. Like the Bucks are getting really old, and that's going to impact. And also like all of the stuff where Giannis wanted to be in Milwaukee and loved it there. I think he still loves it there and like appreciates being the franchise's guy. You got to understand, like there's who these guys were at 25 and there's who these guys are at 30, and they're not the same. You're not the same person. No one's the same person at 25 as they are at 30. Like you're just different. And same thing at 30, 35, 35, 40. You're just going to change. And so that happens a lot with these players where they did have intentions of staying. They did have intentions of being around forever. They did have intentions of being loyal. They did have intentions of rejecting the superstar concepts. Like Kevin Durant talked about this, about how he would want to join a super team like LeBron did. And then he joined the ultimate super team. And so you're going to see this, I think, more and more and more with how the CBA is structured, with where players are at, and with the evolution, as long as players have the amount of power, as long as, let me be clear on this, as long as superstars have that kind of leverage and power, because normal NBA players, average NBA players, role player NBA players do not. So yeah, I think you're right that we're going to see a lot of stuff move. Some of it is that there's so many star team ups that you're going to see like sequential order. And to me, that starts with Harden. Like if Harden, like once Harden gets traded, unless they pull a rabbit out of their hat for another star, that's it to me. I think Embiid's gone. Like I think Embiid's gone by the end of the year. And so like, and you'll see the same thing where if PG gets traded, Kawhi might get dealt. If I don't think, if LeBron leaves, maybe AD gets traded. Like there's all these kind of mechanisms where where one star goes and then the next star is the next one to follow.
Interesting. And I think that's a good lead into the thing that I want to do on this particular episode. I think that we should do a draft between the two of us of the chronological order of when these stars are going to go. And we can talk through a couple of different destinations for these guys over the course of this time. Figure we each do about 5, something like that. Because I think there is going to be a lot of movement. I think it is a possibility that over the course of, I don't know, the next 3 years, that 10 different top 30 guys are moving. Like there's a very strong possibility of that. So we're going to have to reconcile with that. And I think the best way to do it is to actually talk through it. So rules here: draft the player that you think will be traded or leave in free agency the soonest. Then we can debate the destination after that. I will give you the first pick. So who do you want to draft as the first player, star, superstar that you think is going to go?
I mean, it's boring, but it's Harden. There's just no way. Like so Harden's comments in over the weekend in China, notably in China, were not.
Yeah, it is very ironic there.
We're not. It's not ironic. It was very much planned.
Oh, okay.
We're not directed at Daryl Morey, right? Like he's not sending shots at Daryl. Daryl knows the situation. Those comments are made to pressure ownership. And if ownership won't move, it's to pressure the league to be like, this is embarrassing. Figure it out. Get him gone. This is not how we want to run things. We've seen the league interfere in Sixers business before with the Sam Hinkie situation, so it wouldn't be the first time. And, Silver doesn't have a heavy hand the way Stern did, but he has a light hand, and he'll use it to make calls and be like, hey, this is not good for our business. You need to sort this out. And so like, I just don't see, I think Daryl Morey has an extreme tolerance for pain. I just don't think he's going to care. I just think he's going to be like, whatever. Because if it's like all your employees are miserable and the team's really unhappy, Daryl Morey's response is going to be like, sometimes life's hard. Nobody likes this. That's just how it is. But I also think that Harden is so passive aggressive and has such a confidence and is like, he is not a guy that will feel a responsibility to be like, I need to get back out there and do the right thing. That's not who he is. So he will take this as far as it needs to go. And so I think Harden has to be the one that's moved. The Clippers obviously seem like the most logical choice based off of Harden's desires. The trade assets there are not good. They won't give up Terrence Mann. And it's like, if you can't get Terrence Mann for Harden, what are you doing? There might be somebody else that comes along, but part of this is like you get into the first month of the season and there might be a team that's just like, oh no, things are bad. We need to turn this around. I'm going to get fired. Let's trade for Harden. So that's maybe the possibility, but Harden's got to be the number one pick overall.
Yeah, I think it's very fair based off of the recent comments and deservedly so. I do think that the Clippers is where it's going to end up being. Like there's obviously too much smoke there, so I'm going to write down Clippers here. And I am going to take my draft pick and I am going to select Damian Lillard. That's obviously going to manifest at some point. I don't think that, like, because of the contract that he signed, because he is still tied to Portland for the next 3 years, then with a player option after that there's no doubt that he could, like, that this could drag on at least a little bit. But I do think that Dame is the guy that, like, it's going to happen at some point. If Miami can lure some team into a 3-team trade that helps facilitate some assets there, then there's at least something that they could do. But I just can't, like, I can't see any other player getting traded before Dame at this point. Just because I think that this is one that happens before the trade deadline, certainly. And whether it's November or December or January or even before training camp, which I'm sure is what Dame and everybody would want if the actual offer was good, then I think that will probably happen. You've spoken a lot about Dame and the actual package that they're trying to give up as it's one of the worst that you're ever going to see. Do you still feel that way just thinking about it now?
Yeah, it's been bizarre to me. I was talking to Sam Vecini over at The Athletic about it and about, like, I was like, we just got to be careful with our language here, because I think there's a lot of folks that are trying to justify this. And I'm like, it's not good.
Yeah.
You can say it's reasonable. It's reasonable for the leverage. Okay. But that's about as good as you're going to get. Part of it is that there's no blue chipper here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Miami feels that Jokić and Jaquez are the blue chippers. And I said this to somebody that's a fan of the Heat. You think that Jokić and Jaquez are the blue chippers because that's all you have. You don't have another blue chipper to throw into this trade. And there's been frustration from the Miami side expressed through their media of they won't even engage us in trade talks. And the Portland side of that is, why would we do it? Your offer is not going to get better. Like, you have what you have. Maybe you pull off some mid to late first for Tyler. Woohoo! Like, it's not going to get better. And so I don't disagree with you that I think Dame has to be your first pick here, but I would say this. If Harden got dealt, it would not shock me in any capacity if the next one was Joel Embiid in the next 24 hours after that.
Oh, Jesus.
But it's just like, because if you're going to move Harden, or if once Harden's gone and you know that the season's out and Joel's like, hey, I want out, you want to do it the same way that the Nets did with KD, where it's like, don't let this drag on, get it done, out the door, get as much as you can and be done. They already have a team that wants him, that I have heard. Zach Lowe's talked about this. And this apparently is just like the worst kept secret. Apparently, like, the Knicks actually, they were called about the Damian Lillard stuff and were like, we're good. And the reason they were like, we're good is because they were like, we're stockpiling assets for Embiid. So they're ready to throw a whole bunch at him. So that takes me to, like, my next pick, which is like Joel Embiid to the Knicks specifically. Like that's going to be, I think, where it winds up. There's possibilities of other things. I will say the thing with Dame is I do wonder if there are certain teams that would take a shot at it. Toronto's obviously always an interesting one based off the Kawhi history. I also wonder, with things being as liquid as they are with the Clippers, if the Clippers were to get involved. That to me is always like an interesting thing. Like, instead of like, I think they would give up more assets for
I mean,
Dame than they would give up for Harden.
Sure, of course they would, but like, you're talking about blue chippers, and that's like, you're not getting a blue chipper from the Clippers.
Well, if it's a 3-way trade,
oh,
or a 4-way trade,
even spicier,
and PG is involved in it, that changes the equity on the board.
I think that the Clippers are definitely willing to get uncomfortable now. They've shown that willingness in all of these Harden trade talks. And what's the difference between stepping it up and getting a better second banana for Kawhi Leonard than somebody like Dame, and somebody like Dame, who has proven that when he's healthy, can really drive the bus in a way that Kawhi really can't. So there's something there. I like that. But you still think that your pick is going to be Joel Embiid?
Yeah, I'll take Joel Embiid. I started hearing stuff about Embiid November, and that, like, I reported on it. There's just like, keep an eye out. And I just, all of the stuff this summer has not surprised me at all. And to me, this is just like, there's a pattern being established here. And for whatever reason, I just think that he is very likely to change teams. I don't think that all of the attachment that he has marketed himself as is genuine. Maybe that was real and it changed. That's entirely possible. But I just wonder if with all of these guys, if we're talking about timeline, if Harden's gone and they don't get anything in return, Embiid's gonna be like, what am I doing here? And to me, that gets real nasty real quick.
Yeah, it's a good pick. And I mean, if you don't get back an actual blue chip guy for the Harden mess, then how can you really sell that to Embiid that you're actually doing what's best to succeed? Even if it's not your fault. Like, I don't know if the Harden mess is Philly's fault or not. I think that there is a lot of reason to believe that it is. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that Harden did this to himself. Like I said, with the Dame fiasco, there are no good people in this. Like, there's no good guys in these. They're all for their own selfish interests, and sometimes it gets ugly when that's how it goes. So I think Embiid is likely to go next. I think that's a very fair pick and probably what's going to happen. Okay, I have 3 names that I'm debating between right now. I'm debating between Paul George, Karl Anthony Towns, and Zion Williamson. I think that because Zion is under contract for longer, that I'm going to hold off on that. So I will go with Paul George.
Okay.
I will go with Paul George here. And I think that that's, for all the reasons that you laid out, very fair. I thought, and I was thinking about different Paul George destinations. Harden for PG makes some sense. It's not like, if you're Daryl Morey, that's probably what you're hoping for. You're probably hoping to get back a expiring contract star that you believe can potentially augment what you already have, but then also leave that cap space open if need be. I also think that PG going to Sacramento or going to Miami is pretty interesting if the Dame stuff falls through. Paul George makes some sense in a Miami environment where you've got Jimmy Butler already there, and you can say Jimmy's the number 1 and Paul George is the number 2, kind of like Kawhi and Paul George. So what do you think about any of those destinations I mentioned? What about an Indiana reunion for Paul George?
So I think that the only way that PG gets traded is if it's for a star. I think Ballmer moving into the new building, I don't think that anybody's thrilled with how this has gone, but I do think that there's still very much you only get one Kawhi Leonard in franchise history, and this is the time when we got him. We got to try and make this work. So look, there's been a lot of rumblings, and it's just, there's a lot of rumblings about a lot of stuff that doesn't happen, but I've heard a lot of noise about like PG and at least the Clippers kicking the tires on those concepts. So once you hear that it's possible, that's like the first step. It just like, it goes from a no, absolutely not to they'll pick up the phone, right? And that's the start of it. So it's got to be for a star. That's why Miami doesn't make any sense. You're not trading PG for Tyler Hero and Nikola Jokić and
probably not
garbage. You're not trading him to Sacramento for Davian Mitchell and Malik Monk and picks, right? And it doesn't make sense.
I was thinking Keegan Murray.
Yeah, that honestly wouldn't make sense. And in part because I think if you're the Kings, you got to be like, we don't know what Keegan's ceiling is. Let's not be too hasty here.
Fair.
A team that I would be kind of interested in though is like Chicago. I think that'd be an interesting one because what you really need here is you need guys that Kawhi wants. And he's wanted a point guard forever. And the Bulls don't necessarily have a point guard, but that's been the thing is like Kawhi has repeatedly been like, I want a point guard. 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 So that's why the whole Russell thing kind of happened.
Sure.
And so I think there are teams that would take a shot on PG that can return star value that if Kawhi wants it, maybe they talk themselves into it. I do think it's tough though, just because like, if you look at this from an objective standpoint, it's really hard to find guys that are as good as Paul George when he's healthy. It's just tough to find guys that are on that level. Like if you got DeMar DeRozan and whatever with the Bulls, I'm still like, I would be like, no, if I'm the Clippers, but it depends on what Kawhi wants. So I think it's probably a pretty good pick in that you have this other factor and pressure from the top because it's like, we got to make this work. We got to compete now. So I think it's a pretty good pick with Paul George.
Where are you going to go with your next selection then?
Oh gosh. You have Kyrie on this list?
I had him as a possibility.
I think it's funny because I just kind of want to be like, well, of course it's Kyrie. No, I'm not going to go with Pascal. I'm not explaining why. But, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll say it. I think it's going to be Giannis.
Cut out a little bit, but I assume you said Giannis?
Yep. I said Giannis.
Yikes. All right, let's talk about it. They don't have a lot going on for them in Milwaukee right now, given that everybody's aging out.
Yeah, I for me, it's like Drew Holiday is already kind of like, there's already been word that he might retire after the end of this contract. Brook just signed this deal and it's going to be cost prohibitive. And he's probably like, Brook might still be good because Brook's just one of those dudes. Like Chris has already started to decline. I was surprised that they did that deal. I was honestly surprised that Chris did that deal. It does show you like how boxed in the Bucks were. There's nothing in the pipeline. There's no young talent coming up. Like Marjan Beauchamp is not it, right? There's no young talent coming up. They lost actually like meaningful guys from their bench. Like Joe Ingles is gone. Javon Carter is gone. And it's like these guys, Wesley Matthews is gone. And it's like, those are guys that you would be like, whatever. It's like, that's who they had, right? So they just don't have options. And I do think that there is, in part of this, Giannis has had the book and the movie, and he's been top of the world and all of these type of things. And like, you change when you're exposed to that world for 8 years, it changes you. And you've been at this level for about 5, and you just grow and you mature and you change. And so I can see there being a scenario where Giannis is like, I loved it here. We won a championship. I'll never forget it, but I'm ready to move on. And if the whole team is like, yeah, no, it's time's up, we're just not there anymore. It's like, what are the options here? It's like, well, you could trade Drew Holiday. Are you going to get enough return to, keep Giannis where he's like, yeah, I definitely want to stay because the team is so good? I'm probably not. So they don't have their guys. Their good players are too old to get great return for, but they have to keep them, which is why they re-sign them. They're cap strapped, aging, and Giannis has shown some frustration, and you got a rookie coach coming in. So that to me is why I would have to put Giannis, I think, on this list just based off of the timeline. The rest of these players on this list all have various reasons why either they won't ask out or their front office will never, like the ownership group will never agree to it, or that they genuinely want to stay. Like Pascal Siakam, like I would love to put here because it makes the most sense that he would be next. But Pascal he wants to re-sign in Toronto. Like that's where he wants to be. I don't know if he's going to be because I don't know if the Raptors want to pay him, but nobody knows what the Raptors are doing right now. So I'll go with the unstable certainty and go with Giannis as the next kind of name here. I would love it if he retired in Milwaukee, but based off of all the factors and the instability and the contract, I will go with Giannis.
So is he going to Golden State, New Orleans, or OKC?
What about the Lakers?
Well, if I say anything about the lack of assets, then that's probably just going to be like, yeah, but the Lakers, Lakers.
What if they trade him for Anthony Davis?
Oh, oh my God, it's a completely reasonable thing.
LeBron says
for the Lakers to want. Yeah,
LeBron says, "Hey, this is going to be I'm going to ask out after this year in LA. I'm going to do one more year in Cleveland or wherever with, Bronny or whatever, and then be done." They'll honor it. They know the deal is coming. They know they owe the Pelicans picks. They know AD is not going to be healthy enough to hold them up, and they get Giannis for the next forever. Like you'd obviously take AD for Giannis, and you would give up extra assets to get that because it assures your future. And if you're the Bucks, you're probably able to swap in a three-way trade AD for more, send him somewhere else, and get rebuilding assets to replenish some of the stock that you spent on Drew.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. I figure if you have Chris, you have Brook Lopez still, you probably want to keep around a guy like Davis or somebody of that level. So maybe there's a 3-team trade to be had here. I just tend to think that Milwaukee will do what's best for their rebuilding, and that are they really going to get Giannis to the Lakers? Like, obviously the league is going to want that. They're going to love that. That's probably where Luke is eventually going to go. But like,
bear in mind,
both go there.
Giannis is such a big part of that franchise, though. It's kind of like Dame, where if Dame had wanted a team that had an asset set to come back, it would be different. Like he just specifically wants the team with what I think is the worst trade package in the league. Right?
Interesting.
Like if Dame wanted the Lakers, I don't know if the Lakers would do AD for Dame because it's different. That's much closer and arguable, and you could very easily make an AD's better argument over Dame. But it's probably easier because Portland again is able to be like, give us Anthony Davis, we'll send him to a third team, they'll give us draft capital and a young player, and now we're in motion. Like that works, right? So I think that's kind of the dynamic here. Is I do think that Milwaukee would feel like they would want to I think they would want to facilitate what Giannis wants, and I don't think that there would be as much resistance with as there has been with other situations. In part because they did win the title. It's like he gave you the title, so you got to respect what he's given you.
It's completely understandable, and I don't want to bemoan it. Like I do think that it's probably more likely that they still send him somewhere else. But so you're taking Giannis to LA? That's where you're going?
I'll take Giannis to LA. Warriors are always a pretty strong maybe. Like Draymond and Clay and I guess Kuminga and every pick until the end of time. And you just pair the end of Steph with Giannis and that's your team. Makes sense.
All right. Well, you sold me on Paul George to Chicago. So that's where I have him going right now.
Yeah.
All right. For my next pick, I am going to go with Zion.
Okay.
I think that is going to happen sometime soon. I don't know if it's going to be. It's probably not a trade deadline thing this year, but it might be an offseason thing next year. Like they have some expectations now, and they've got so much in the pipeline right now from an asset standpoint. And if Zion for a third year in a row isn't able to finish the season, isn't able to be their star caliber player, I think they might go star hunting and try to find somebody else that pairs well with Brandon Ingram, McCollum, maybe if you count him in that. Guys like Trey Murphy and some of their young guys. I think that Zion leaves, and I think that he goes to OKC.
Woo! I love that. Oh, that'd be so much fun.
It would be, right?
Oh, that'd be so much fun. I love that idea. I also think you're wrong.
Okay,
so if they were going to trade him, it was going to be at the draft. That was going to be it. Because what I've heard is that front office felt that Scoot Henderson is a future MVP caliber player. And they still couldn't get a deal done because they, and all the there's talk about like we never really had blah, 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 blah. Okay, is that why New Orleans had the Scoot Henderson's medicals? Is that why? And it wasn't just talks with Charlotte. So if they were going to do it, I think they would have done it on draft night. I think they would have pulled the trigger, and I think they would have probably been like, we'll give you Zion, and because they had that much confidence in Scoot. But now also they are they're a little bit locked in, and there's tension there with Zion. That's obvious. And the team prefers Brandon. They all think Brandon Ingram is the guy. Coaches love him, teammates love him, etc. But I just think that you will always kind of return to these spurts where he's healthy and just be like, man, I don't know. Because they were so good in December. That team was righteously good in December. They were so good. And then the wheels fell off because everybody got hurt. And I just think that he'll always be too tantalizing to give up on, and maybe always, too out of shape, too hurt to trust.
I do think that we've seen the anagram or the analogy. Sorry, the anagram. The analogy with Blake Griffin, actually, somebody who is probably he's probably done now. I think that Zion makes a lot of sense. Nobody would have given up Blake. You saw nobody thought that the Clippers would actually give up Blake.
Yeah.
And then they did, because they were a smart front office and understood that they had other things that they needed to do for their future. And Zion Williamson on a max contract, if you're not going to get max value anymore, is probably something that you could do without. So I think that if they really do believe in Brandon Ingram, I like Trey Murphy a lot. I think he makes sense as kind of another wing in their pipeline. Dyson Daniels is really good. They probably need a better center going forward. And if you get another backcourt guy, hypothetically, it could be Josh Giddey. Does that make some sense? Just you get somebody else who could run the show there. I like that idea as a place where Zion could actually rehab his value a little bit.
Yeah, I would love it. I think it'd be amazing. Division trades are tough unless you're Tim Conley. But I think I would love to see it. Shea and Zion would be incredible together. So I've got Harden, I've got Embiid, and I've got Giannis.
Yep.
I will. I'm gonna take Trae Young.
I'm not surprised. He makes sense as a guy that, whether it's this upcoming offseason after this one that we're currently in, or even the trade deadline after that, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this is just there's a lot of confusion over Atlanta and the power structure and who's running things and what wrestler wants. And it seemed for a while like they were moving away from the clutch Trae dominated structure. That was part of the Quinn Snyder thing, was that there were other coaches that Trae Young would have preferred. And instead they went with Quinn Snyder, who I do think was the best coach available. But that was an interesting one, because that's not a coach that you bring on to be, to do whatever Trae Young wants. Right.
Right.
It's not that he'll empower him. He'll probably make him better, but it's not the guy. There were a number of other guys that they would have wanted. And so that was kind of interesting. But then there was talk of DeJounte Murray maybe getting dealt around before the draft, after the draft, before free agency, and the first couple of days of free agency, and nothing materialized, and they're gonna keep Murray. But I do think that there's like a possibility of the team just kind of going in a different direction. That I think they could be really good this year. If they got Pascal Siakam for DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella in a 3-way trade with Dallas, I would skyrocket the Hawks up my chart. I think that Pascal Siakam is a player that helps you win games. And him, DeJounte Murray, Onyeka Okongwu, and AJ Griffin, I would be like, yeah, no, we can cook with this. But that maybe doesn't happen, and maybe this winds up just being like Trey struggles from the field again, and it just winds up being okay. As far as like what team takes Trae Young, it's really funny because it's be like what team would want him? I think lots of teams. Here's an easy one. We'll go back to the well with Chicago. If Atlanta called up Chicago and was like, hey, we'll give you Trae Young for Zach LaVine and Patrick Williams, Chicago's like, done immediately, sure thing,
yeah,
no problem. Right,
makes a lot of sense too.
They've been trying to move LaVine. That moves LaVine, gets them a new engine. They can reconfigure around Trae, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there are other teams that would take a shot on Trae Young as well. I think Orlando, honestly, is like an interesting one because they really want a point guard, and they would probably feel that they've got enough supporting talent and defense that they could probably make it work. If you go to the Western Conference, it gets, I think, a little bit tougher, but I do think that there's some interesting stuff that could happen with Trae Young, depending on the direction that the next couple months take.
He's a really good player. And like I said before, I have him ranked 15th on my top 100 list because he's a really, really, really good player. And it's kind of been, I think, forgotten a little bit, but it's just really hard to build around unless you commit entirely to him, and committing to his style of basketball is not always great. He's got to be willing to buy in to whichever situation he goes to. Like, I think going to another team might be good for him, just so that he understands, like, it didn't work out. Your style only did not work out at your previous stop. So I think Chicago's good. I actually think that Trae Young and Paul George meeting up in Chicago makes a lot of sense. Like, that would be a good way for Arturas Karnisovas to really shake up the deck a little bit. I am going to take. Should I take Towns or Luka? I think I'll go with Towns. Does he even count in this conversation for like superstar star trades?
I think so. He changed the game, if you ask him.
Change the game, baby.
Again, I'll just say, like, I think. I'm trying to think. Well, like, here's an interesting question: Would the Phoenix Suns be better or worse with Karl-Anthony Towns instead of Ayton?
They'd be worse, but like, that's because you need somebody like Ayton who could really anchor. Like, Ayton can't even really do that, but he does it better than Towns, I think.
Maybe Towns is more versatile. He can play at the level where Ayton can't. The most successful season the Wolves have had defensively was when they were playing Cat at the level. Much like the Nuggets did. Like, there's a lot of similarities with what you can do there.
Right.
Towns, here's the thing. Towns has a good engine. He just needs to learn how to do it. Like, this is all like, he's getting old, so it's not going to happen. But the stuff, Towns wants to be great. He's not lazy. I don't think he's selfish.
Yeah.
He's just boneheaded. Like, he tries too hard sometimes. That's his biggest problem. You know, he picks up offensive fouls because he tries too hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if age and wisdom mature him, and in his 28 to 31 years, he's like, he figures out how to make all that stuff come together. Like, imagine if the Dallas Mavericks talk them into a trade, and you got Luka and Cat.
He'd be good. He'd be really good. And he could actually anchor some stuff on the second unit for that team in ways that Kristaps at that point couldn't. So there's a lot there. What about Toronto for him?
Don't hate for the
This
Wolves.
is kind of like long term, where Jakob Poeltl being there doesn't really matter as much, like due to 6 months out.
I don't know, but I don't think you pair him with Scotty Barnes because your timeline's off.
Is it that far off?
It's far off enough, I think.
Well, if you want Scotty to be like really good right now, then you want to pair him with really good players right now.
I don't know that you want that though. I think you want to instead give him time to develop. I think you want to give him 22 to 25 to get better. All
right, let me think through these teams now.
Way.
What about? Oh no, Oh no, go ahead.
Houston.
Yeah.
You get you get whichever one of the young guys they don't want.
I mean, like probably positionally like Şengün, right? Like,
yeah, like that makes. But I think you could probably play. Look, like Şengün Towns is gonna be bad defensively. That's pretty obvious. But like it would also cook offensively. You have the opposite. You have the switch of what they have now, right? Where Şengün gets to play facilitator for Towns, and Towns gets to space the floor around Şengün. Like if it's kind of all the problems that Towns Gobert has inherently get mitigated when you swap it to Towns at 5, Şengün at 4. So I actually think there's some possibility there. The only thing I just don't know that the Wolves want a guy that's that young, and you have to get that guy in that deal. You don't do Karl-Anthony Towns for Jae'Sean Tate in a pick. Like that's just not what you do. So
I wish that one of Draymond or Gobert could shoot so that I could send Cat to Golden State. That would make some sense. Or hell, I mean, actually, no. Portland's too far off the timeline. OKC probably makes some sense. They've been talked about as a Cat destination before, but I'm not going to go with that. I will go.
Wait, I got one more.
Okay.
Atlanta in a 3-way deal, and Capella goes to Minnesota.
Okay. Tim Connolly sending out Clint Capella in the Houston Denver 4-team trade, and then acquiring him in a separate deal would be pretty funny. Trey and Towns makes sense.
Yeah, I would love that combo. Again, defense is bad, but I would love the combo.
All right, we'll do it. If they're not going to get Pascal, then maybe they go with Cat. Towns to ATL. All right, sir, you have one more pick. We'll go rapid fire between these two.
This one's tough, actually.
Gonna go with Luka?
I'm not gonna go with Luka. I don't think Luka leaves. I really don't. I don't think Luka leaves. They just signed AD to an extension, so I can't go off the board and take him. Nobody else. A lot of these teams don't have a superstar, so it's like
that's one of the problems. Is like you're trying to pair these guys up with somebody else that makes sense, but then you're swapping stars, and that's the only way to get value. These are hard. These are hard trades to make.
I'll go Pascal 5th. It makes the most sense. He's an asset. Like there's been so much talk about him. I think he's a difference maker. I think teams should be way more aggressive in trying to get him. Although I understand not doing it because of how frustrating Toronto is. But yeah, I'll go Pascal just based off of everyone's like, really? You lost Fred VanVleet and you're just gonna run this into the ground, huh? That's what you're doing. So I'll say Pascal Siakam because it makes the most sense.
Completely fair. Do you have a particular destination in mind for him?
I love Atlanta. Like the idea of a Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, AJ Griffin, Pascal Siakam, Onyeka Okongwu lineup. I'm just like, yes, that. Give me that. That is good. Give me that Hawks team. So that would honestly be, of all of the destinations, that would probably be my preferred, is that he winds up in Atlanta.
Now, I did take Towns to Atlanta. Does that change your opinion?
If Atlanta was off the board, I would. Boy. Where would he be?
To recap, we've got Harden to the Clippers, Dame to Miami, Embiid to the Knicks, Paul George to Chicago, Giannis to the Lakers, Zion to OKC, Trae to Chicago as well, Towns to Atlanta.
Let's do Pascal Siakam to the Kings.
He was on the list or the Kings were on my list for Pascal. Them and the Mavericks, actually.
Because again, I think Keegan Murray is so good that I think you want to see what he turns into. But if you were just like, no, like we really want to win, like we really do believe it. I don't think you should, but like Siakam covers for a lot of Sabonis's problems. They have the young assets. Like Toronto would be like, okay, like Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell, and some picks. Yeah, all right.
Pretty good.
It would feel like a lot. It would feel like too much to give up for Siakam, honestly. But I think Siakam is an all NBA player. He is so good at so many things. I have dipped on him when he's been bad, but like last year, the last 2 seasons, honestly, Siakam is great at so many things. People don't understand what a good playmaker he is for others without needing the ball in his hands. He's efficient. He plays hard. He's smart. Like I love Pascal Siakam. So I think a Kings trade would be really cool.
I think no matter what, Toronto in the next year has to break up him, Scotty, and OG because they just all operate in the same spots on the floor and they're all the same size. Like it's really, really hard to do what they're trying to do. And it just doesn't work if you don't have any spacing. So, or any rim protection, which they don't have either of those things. I am going to wrap us up with Jaylen Brown. I know that he just signed the Supermax, but I think that that's going to last 2 years. And this is where we're kind of at the far out point with this exercise. I think that Jaylen Brown lasts 2 more years in Boston, and then he goes to another team. What team that's going to be by that point is really difficult to imagine actually now. So we've got the Kings for Pascal. Which team is actually going to be good that's going to want Jaylen Brown? Memphis won't trade Desmond Bane. Could it be Houston? Could it be Houston trading Jalen Green? That'd be interesting.
That would be interesting. There's a lot of connections. There was a lot of talk about them trying to trade for Jaylen Brown before the extension.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be interesting. That's a good fit. I would say Memphis is the other one, just based off of. The problem with Memphis, I think, is like you create the same problem, which is Jalen doesn't want to be number 2, and the only reason you would trade Bane is if you were like, Bane can be number 1 somewhere, but we got to trade him somewhere that wants him to be number 1.
I have the right answer. It's a Donovan Mitchell swap.
Maybe. I think I'm kind of in the minority. I actually think the Cavs are going to kill it this year, and I actually think that all this talk about Mitchell leaving is going to die down when it's like, oh no, like they're really good and they made a run and he buys back in. I think he actually likes this team, and I think this team is really good. So we'll see what happens. But I think the other problem, I guess, you can trade him because it does play Garland more at point, which I think he's good at. So you can make that work. That'd be an interesting one, I think, for sure.
They've had so many issues getting a wing like into that building that actually makes some sense. So like Jaylen Brown's one of the few that you could actually describe as a wing in the NBA. So and also like the Mitchell Tatum connection makes a lot of sense. Like I think aren't those guys connected in various ways through the 2017 draft? But okay, well I'm going with Jaylen Brown, and I will send him to Houston. That I think that's just more logical. So. All right, that was a fun exercise, a long podcast, and I do genuinely appreciate we've got some good content out of this. To wrap up, Matt, your team, it's Harden to the Clippers, Embiid to the Knicks, Giannis to the Lakers, Trae Young to the Bulls, and Pascal to the Kings. My team, Dame to Miami, Paul George to Chicago, Zion to OKC, Towns to Atlanta, and Jaylen Brown to Houston. There's a lot of movement there. A lot of guys. I think you could justify any of those decisions, or maybe we look back at this and laugh. That'll be funny too.
Probably.
That's what happens when you try to make predictions. But anyway, Matt, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, you've got the top 100 coming out very soon. Everybody should be on the lookout for that. Anything else you've got in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'll be starting my win total breakdown, so you can catch breakdowns of every single team and what they're projected to do. I'll also have some schedule analysis up tomorrow. Action Network app.
I am looking forward to that. As always, I know this is maybe the first time to take the Denver Nuggets under. It's a very rare thing, but I'm sure that'll probably be on the board if I'm not mistaken. But should be very interesting. Everybody, that's going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends at Superbook Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Matt, as always, for hopping on with us. No podcast on Friday night. I'm going to a Rockies game, so pray for me. Should be great. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys very soon.